Hello and welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast, hosted by Daryl Dittmer, where we talk about the fight or fights that so many of us engage in this lifetime, as well as ways to potentially relieve ourselves of those fights. Let's get started. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I am joined by, and I have to read this because it's a great intro. I love all the stuff here. Michele Weinstat Miller, a 4 times published author. Michele's books have been named Best of 2019 by Strand Magazine, Outstanding August 21, Mystery and Suspense title by Library Journal, and semifinalist in the Amazon Breakthrough Novel Awards. Kirkus Reviews, and I love this one, calls her Mary Higgins Clark with teeth. Michele now serves as general counsel for a nonprofit agency that provides reentry services to the formerly incarcerated. Michele is also a very long-term sober human. Thank you so much for joining me, Michele. So great to see you today.
Thank you, Daryl. It's great to be here after so much time on the social media together, getting to see your face and talk to you live. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And you know, we've had the opportunity to have a little chat before, and I thought it was just really compelling and interesting, and you know, some really cool things came out. I know we both do the writing thing. You've done, you know, some wonderful work and gotten some wonderful accolades, which I think is really, really cool. And there's so many different places to start with the story, but if you don't mind, I'd love to, you know, maybe the journey that led you to being where you are today would be wonderful to hear.
Oh, okay, sure. So I began my nefarious career as an addict at 13 years old. My father had multiple sclerosis. He was very ill, and the family was pretty much in disarray. And I medicated those feelings. I wanted to start getting high by the time I was 11, so I guess I was destined for that. So at 13, I started with alcohol and marijuana, and then quickly found pills. And stopped going to school. My first, not stopped going to school regularly. And my first bottom, which I didn't recognize as a bottom, was that I was kidnapped and raped on my way home from school and at 13. And then I went on a really bad run for about 1.5 years. And then someone spoke to me about self-respect. I had missed Self-Respect 101, apparently. And, you know, we come from very different backgrounds. You come from the countryside and a military dad. I mean, it was amazing to see how different our backgrounds were. I came from a very progressive family where the child was respected and was supposed to make their own decisions. It was a shit show. I guess I could say that since your book talks about people's heads being up their asses, right? So I could say something was a shit show, right? Well, anyway, I got myself together about 14, and this sort of ties into what you talk about sometimes because I felt like, you know, I think that I got the message that ego was the way for me to have a good life. So I just proceeded to try to build a resume. So once I stopped getting high and throwing up on your lawn and doing those things in public, and I became sort of undercover, you know, did a little here and there, I started being a super achiever. You know, I got my black belt in karate by the time I was 19. I graduated high school at 16. I went on and I had a 4.0 in college. By that time, I was living with a drug dealer and doing cocaine. So you could see that I wasn't getting the message that recovery is a holistic thing. And so I was definitely, while the path seemed to be, and my parents thought I was doing great and that sort of thing, the path seemed to be going well, but the path was actually going in an entirely different direction. But I got a 4.0 in college, and I thought, well, I'm doing so well with 16 credits a semester, so let me do 21 credits, and so I could really show people how wonderful I was. So by 19, I graduated from college with a 4.0 index and went to NYU Law School, graduated by 22. At this point, I had been through domestic violence, relationships. I had been through all sorts of stuff in my personal life, but managed to be a high achiever. But as soon as I got out of law school, it was the cocaine craze days of the 80s, and I was offered cocaine, and it was just, I call myself a person who switched seats on the Titanic. I never really understood the nature of addiction. So if I stopped doing one substance, I thought I was fine and I could do other substances. And it took me a long time to learn that lesson, that I couldn't do that. So I sorry, I'm not alone in the house. I never seem to be. I live in Manhattan, and so I'm in an apartment. So it's like things are always going on. And I have one big dog and 2 cats and 2 humans in the house, right now, and 1 human away. So, I'm just not used to, like, when I'm speaking on these sorts of things, having distractions. And we went through this last time. So, okay, so here we are. And nobody is doing anything wrong. It's completely me. So anyway, once I got a big firm job, right? And I was still trying to prove to everybody how wonderful I was. I was, very excelling in athletics, and I was a lawyer. And my dad died when I was 22, and it really devastated me. And I went off the cliff at that point. And at that point, people were doing cocaine socially, but me, I'm not much of a social drinker or drug user, so I ended up having like significant problems, and it really warped my thinking. So as an example of that, I decided that instead of being an attorney, I could be a drug dealer. And it's sort of, there were things that happened that led to that, but that is what happened. Within a couple of years, so I stopped practicing law and started doing very well as a drug dealer, because I am an overachiever, and I applied all of those entrepreneurial ideas to drug dealing. And I ended up unfortunately, I sold a lot of drugs. And it gave me the illusion that I could do that, and not practice law, and not be a part of society, and not have the normal responsibilities. And I had no ethics, no innate ethics guiding me. Like, we practice principles. I didn't have principles. Everything filtered through my own, I guess, I don't know if it was narcissistic, maybe, my own self-centered filter and my justification of the lifestyle that I was living. I switched seats on the Titanic again because I thought cocaine was the problem, because I had a really bad cocaine problem, and I got a perforation and I couldn't stop, when I started. And, so I ended up switching seats to heroin. And within a few weeks, I had gotten arrested. And so I got arrested in New York, where we had the Rockefeller law, and faced 15 to life in prison, and fought that case for 4 years. In the interim, once you get incarcerated, everything falls apart very quickly. I went to Rikers Island. I got arrested again. I went to Rikers Island again, spent a few months there. And ultimately, it was like welfare and homelessness and all of that. And until one day, really making a very long story short, one day I found 12-step programs, and it completely turned my life around. And since that time, I was disbarred due to a felony conviction, and at about 5 years clean, I got my license back. And I've been practicing law. I'm 35 years clean, and I've been practicing law for maybe about 30 years, all in public service and giving back, and stay very close to the program and the principles that got me sober, and have been really blessed to stay sober, raise 2 kids, homeowner, go on 2 vacations a year, all that stuff, all that regular stuff. And I'm very grateful for it.
That's what a story. I mean, it's I love to hear the word gratitude. I love to hear when people say I'm very grateful for it, because ultimately it is about living our lives, right? It's about living our lives. There was an old timer when I first came around years ago, and he used to say, our what we're here to do in the 12 steps is to become a useful member of society. And I was like, well, that's boring. Like, is that it? Is that all we're going to do? And you've obviously achieved incredible amounts of things, which is really, really cool. But, there's the useful member of society. And then there's, all the things that you've done in your life, which certainly not the least of which is your writing. That's one of the books that I was fortunate to read that you recently wrote and published, and it's just I've written a book and blah blah blah, but your writing to me was just compelling and it just gripped me, and it was really really cool. So how did you go into the writing journey, and we'll talk about how that sort of marries with recovery and sobriety and all that stuff in a little bit, but how did that journey start?
I mean, you get clean and you start to, like, your inner desires. Like, I always wanted to write a book. I just had the idea for a book, sat down one day and I was like, let me write the first page. And I got into my head just the way I do everything else, that, if I wrote a page a day, at the end of 365 days, I have a book. And so what ended up happening was I would write more than a page a day. And, at the end of 10 months, I had a book, and then I edited it, and then I, found an agent for it, and then they couldn't sell it. And then I had to show up and write another book, and found another agent for it, and then they couldn't sell it. So it's been perseverance, but I am always, and I very inspired by the story of people who have a background in addiction like I do, and also the idea, like, I tend to write thrillers, and I always feel like I come back to that theme of being pulled backwards into a life that you thought you had left. And so that has been something that I in the lower power, it's, folks are clean, they're, sober, they're living their lives, everything's coming together. And then this evil power lands, in the midst of them, that, threatens to pull them back into the disillusionment that they were in before. And that, that's one of the things. I mean, the 13-step zombie recovery was about, a zombie apocalypse happening, and only addicts and alcoholics have the gene that sort of makes them a little bit immune to the zombies. So they're the only survivors on Earth, and what fun they have,
Wow.
So I do come back to the theme, the Gone by Morning features a previously incarcerated character and the family misunderstandings that happen, but it's a crime thriller. So these things are woven in. So there is a very much a theme of addiction, I think, more than my agent would like. I think that there's a lot of market for nonfiction, but I think there's some doubt, about the market for fiction about addiction. So that's that's just the kind of marketing stuff. Like, as a traditionally published author who's trying, to sell my work to publishing companies, they are not grabbing on these books the way one would like. And so we go out and we guerrilla market them and that sort of thing. And I think that's just the nature of the market right now. But I certainly love writing. And if there's anything, I don't know about you, but if there's one thing, like, I was watching the Olympics recently, the Olympic trials. And after, like, somebody would get like a world record, and they would be like, thank God. And I finally understood that, like, they could practice all they want every day and be the most diligent practicer. But if they didn't have grace, if they weren't born with certain kind of genes or something, and have the resilience so that they didn't, have injuries, they would not be winning they wouldn't be setting world records. And it's the same thing I feel when I sit down to write, like, and I know, and you're a really good writer, and I really appreciate your writing style and your skill at writing, but there's no way. Yeah. And that's from my heart, because I think you're really great. There's no way that we created that situation. We may have honed it and worked at it, and all that is necessary, but there's a certain grace, and some people have the grace to, speak about recovery to thousands of people, and some people have the grace to be able to, be a politician speaking before thousands of people. But everybody has their own gift, and I don't think anybody lacks gifts. It's just that the gifts that I have, it's one of the the biggest, I think, in my life indicators of the existence of a power greater than myself, because I didn't create the ability to sit down and not even know what a chapter is going to be about, and then stand up an hour later and I've got the story has gone in a whole different direction. Yeah.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
Yeah, it is.
That's really cool, because I remember when I was writing my book, and I've got another one coming out in about a little over a month, but I'm
Congratulations.
fascinated by the fact that it's almost like it comes through me, as opposed to something that I conjure up in my melon. And I believe that wholeheartedly, and talking about a power greater than myself, I don't think there's anything in my life that I've ever done that is something that, I conjured, I figured out, I this, I that. I was given something, and like you mentioned, we have to nurture it. We have to do the best we can. And I do believe that is a prerequisite to moving things forward. I can't sit on the couch and hope a book gets written. Excuse me. I have to write a book.
That's what I'm doing right now, Daryl. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm tired. I need the book to write itself right now.
Do you have another one in the works right now?
I have a couple of books in like that I've started that are at various stages, but like I really have decided to take a little break, and I've had a book come out every couple of years for the past several years, and plus I work full time, plus long hours, kind of full time, and kids and animals and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to enjoy the journey a little bit and give myself a break, so that the next thing I write will be something I really love.
Very cool.
So I've given myself permission, but I'm not 100% comfortable with it. I'm like, are you supposed to be doing something right now? Because I could be writing a half hour a day, and and just moving things along, but I'm giving myself permission right now.
I think that's wonderful. I really do. I have a hard time doing that myself, for myself. And what is the old the Buddhist, the Zen monk said something like, don't just do something, sit there. And sometimes
they say that in Al-Anon too. Is that a Zen thing?
Yeah, I think so. That's funny.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's but sometimes, and I found I have fried myself I don't know how many times, and I got sober young, which I was very fortunate to do, and then my life since that time has been getting my head out of my ass, and it wasn't getting rid of the drinking and drugs that was the get my head out of my ass part. It was the rest of life, and so I've fried myself many times trying to do too much or go too hard, or et cetera, and every time I do it, I learn a little something more, and I don't do it quite so bad the next time.
Yeah.
Which is cool, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, learn.
Well, you seem like you've hit the formula. Your book is very successful, and it seems working.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know what how do you define getting your head out of your ass? How do you define
that? It's a life journey. Yeah, I mean, I wrote the subtitle that way because
I love it.
Thank you. For me, that was it's been a joy, and truly the unexpected joy of getting my head out of my ass. It's been a joy learning how to live, and it's not something that and again, we talked a little bit about a power greater than myself. I feel like the first few years was really difficult because I was learning to live as a person on this planet, because I was 19 when I got sober, and I was also trying to be sober and trying to be a better human. And for me, getting my head out of my ass is being a better person, a useful member of society, making myself useful to others. And I've tried to do that, through 12-step stuff and through just helping people. I really take it as my charge to help people, but but I never had, people talk about purpose, and for a long, long time, I had no real purpose. There wasn't anything that I could say, oh, that's my purpose. And now I look at that differently, with the advent of writing and the books and that sort of thing. It's my purpose is to help other people based on my experiences. And that's, to me, that's another step in the journey of getting my head out of my ass.
Yeah, I like to say that those of us in recovery have a superpower, that our experience, strength, and hope is our superpower. And that, we're able, just because of what we've been through, we're able to save lives. I have a friend who always says, go out and save some lives now. And that's true. And civilians, as we sometimes call them, just don't have that ability to do that. So it is a gift. And whether it's my life purpose or not, sometimes I think my life purpose is just to play my hand the best I can.
We were chatting about our life's purpose, and I know we had a brief little interruption, but we're back now, and you were talking about your purpose, Michele.
Right. And I just, was mentioning, our superpower is experience, strength, and hope. And not, nobody, I hope nobody underestimates how amazing that is, that we can actually save lives like that. And that sometimes just a word you say to somebody will make all the difference in the world. And I, I do hope that my writing does that for people, or even just gives them, if it gives somebody 10 or 15 hours of peace, then or just enjoyment, it does fulfill me, and, I'm happy for it. It's so easy to discount those small things that, that one gets back, but.
It is. I think our charge as, people in recovery, is to do that. There comes a point where that's kind of what we have to do, right? And try to help others. And I try to do it in so many different ways. I mean, I think my books hopefully will help people, but I also, just in terms of trying to help people live a better life, or think a little differently, or maybe some of those things that they're dealing with aren't as life ending as you think they are. And, just talking to people about how to have a better life. And I think, because it's pretty rare, quite honestly, where who walks around saying, oh, I'm pretty happy, joyous, and free, not that many people do. And I think there's a lot of people in recovery who have taken the 12 steps, real seriously, and worked that part, and sort of followed that roadmap for life, who could say, I feel good when I wake up in the morning. And I think that's something that's really crucial for us to share.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the legal work I do is mostly with people who are returning from prison, or have had an interaction with the legal system, the criminal legal system, which I've had the misfortune of having, and which is really a lifetime trauma. But one of the things is that, a lot of times I'm around on the first day somebody comes home with 40 or 50 years in prison.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And sometimes they're people that were 20 when they went to prison, 25 when they went to prison, and they're elderly by the time they come out. And they, and I get to see people helping them learn how to use an iPhone, and I get to talk to them. And interestingly, it's quite overwhelming as an experience, as you can imagine. So oftentimes they have to go through a period where they get very unhappy. Before, they get happy, they're thrilled, then they get really stressed out because everything is difficult, and then they come to the other side of that. But, talking with some of them and seeing that they just want a peaceful life, like they knowing that they've missed the majority of their life, at least in terms of being free. And it puts a lot of stuff in perspective. Like if they, that it's so hard in this society to feel satisfied with your own life. Like that's not the way this culture breeds us. So it takes a lot of, spiritual work just to enjoy the journey of your life and just to be satisfied and grateful for it. That's why I think making gratitude lists is such an amazing practice. And some of my best years in recovery were when I was part of groups where people did like these email gratitude lists, like all the, women would be on one gratitude list, and we would all every day share whatever things that we wanted to share on this email list. And because it's just like, just an amazing, it's an amazing gift that we get when we live this lifestyle, that to be grateful for what we have and to understand that it's all about the journey. And I, me being the kind of person, and I wouldn't be surprised if you were too, being the kind of OCD super achiever kind of person, that I could miss my entire life obsessing about the next goal. And I just don't want to do that, which is partly why I've taken this little break in the writing, and I'm letting the book go where it goes. And, is because I really, want to enjoy my kids and my home and my dog and my cats and my husband and, and just, but still I have to be of service. Definitely.
For sure. And I can't imagine like the life that you live and the person you are, and how many people honestly walking around today. And you said, becoming happy in the world today is really difficult. I agree. I think it's impossible in how the world is set up and structured without looking at the unseen, without looking at the gratitude, without looking at things that we're grateful for. But who talks about gratitude? Who talks about, not too many people do. Who talks about let's be grateful for what we have. Let's not just constantly be trying to grab the next thing or do the next thing. And I am exactly like you, the OCD, maniac, whatever, like just go. But it feels really good that over time I'm able to temper myself, and it's not always comfortable. It's not always comfortable to don't just do something, sit there. Right. Because
it's really,
I mean, it's difficult, hard. but it's necessary.
We have to let go. I like, there's somebody named Lila Orr that talks about letting go of the old ideas, I mean, it is all through the literature and all the programs, but, letting go of the idea that I'm doing something wrong if I'm not doing something more, it's a very strong voice in the head.
It is. And I was speaking with someone not too long ago about that very thing, that it's, I think we grew up, and people who, get addicted and go down that road are very sensitive human beings. I think we're very sensitive human beings, and we're sensitive to all of the potential input, and, we harden up over time, but I'm a sensitive dude, and I spend a lot of my life trying not to be. And trying to push that away, and trying to be tough guy, Rambo, all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't work. That doesn't make me feel any better. It makes me feel worse. And so going back to the gratitude and not having to have how I feel be dictated by what I accomplish.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah. I mean, that old idea that you got from your dad that you were supposed to just man up all the time. It must be a lot to let go of. I can imagine. And and it's hard to let go of this low self-esteem too. And I have I always, like I say, I have a really big shame button, like that my mother installed. Love her to death, but she was a person with, like they say, low self-esteem and a big ego herself. And, when I make a mistake, like that perfectionism thing, when I make a mistake, it's really hard for, I've gone to, I like to say that I'm a mistake-making machine. I heard that once, like decades ago, and I've run with it ever since. Like, as long as I'm human, I'm going to be a mistake-making machine. And like the humility we learn helps us to be able to tolerate the fact that we're imperfect, and how trying to be perfect is just a recipe for disaster, and comparing ourselves to others and all the things that we do in that whole vein how that's a recipe for suffering. So, but the issue is that we are always going to keep making mistakes. So nowadays I could see myself coming and I could say, oh, okay. And, I could sit down and I could journal about it, write about it, and, not take everything I feel as being a sign of the truth, that, feelings aren't facts, but they do tell us something. So they're not fiction either. But they do pass and they pass faster if I,
Right.
try to like write about them and understand, how those old ideas play into me having those feelings, so.
Yeah. I when I first got around the tables and people would say things like this too shall pass, or first things first, or easy does it, or one day at a time, and I had no idea what those things meant. I was overwhelmed by, maybe it was just because they were too simple. I just couldn't get my head around it, but I couldn't find myself living that way. I couldn't find myself integrating that stuff into how I live my life. And it took a long time to understand, like you said, feelings aren't facts. And I 100% agree they're not fiction either. So that makes it a little bit tough. You have to kind of dig a little deeper and say, okay, maybe they're just guideposts. Maybe there's something that's trying to gently move me in a direction. And if I don't maybe move in that direction, that feeling may get stronger.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things, like when I was new, I did not know feelings passed. I had no experience with letting feelings pass. I either, I would, if I had a fight with my boyfriend, I would make up on the dope line, like, or, a lot of people just pick up a drink. Like there was no reference point for me to know that, but people told me that. And so the first time I tried it and I saw how quickly the feelings passed, that was amazing. Like one of those light bulb experiences. I'm like, oh, so feelings, because it really was, I was just trusting you that they passed on that first time, and
Right.
really did not know. I felt overwhelmed by my feelings. The other thing that I learned quite a long time ago, that I've tried to remember, is like it related to the 11th step, where I heard it said a long time ago, nothing I say is really original, or most things aren't. Only the superpower one was original to me. Everything else, I like to get attributed to whoever. Somebody said in a meeting decades ago, they said the 11th step taught them that 9/10 of their problem is in their thinking. They mentally create a world in which they cannot live. So like just understanding that a lot of times when I get a feeling, it reflects the fact that I have mentally created a world in which I cannot live, whether it's due to perfectionism, unrealistic expectations, goals that have nothing to do with happiness, grandiosity, low self-esteem, all of the thinking that we have that creates feelings that we can't live with. That was a helpful thought to me, because just a little bit of meditation teaches me that, most of the stuff I think about. I mean, how many times have you had conversations with people that weren't there? Like you're going to a family gathering. I mean, I remember every time I used to go to a family gathering, I would imagine all these conversations with all of these people I had issues with, and I would say this and they would say that, and I would say this, and then it dawned on me after a time that I'm having conversations with people who aren't here. Like, so anytime I'm playing out a conversation in my head with somebody who's not there, like I know right then that I have mentally created a world in which I cannot live and don't need to live in it. So that's, we live and learn, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that saying, mentally created a world in which we cannot live. Yeah, that's 100% true. And so then the question becomes, how do we create a world? And I look at it like, how do I create the world inside of me where I can live with myself and also live with the rest of the world? I think that's the question.
Right. And I think over time that we practicing principles, actually it becomes grooved. It becomes more of a habit to practice the principles, and when we do that, we pause and we're more aware of how we're impacting others. I definitely have not reached perfection, but I think I've gotten a lot better with a lot of that. Yeah, that pause, like getting the habit of pausing is so important. And then also getting the habit of not trying to be right all the time. That certainly helps a lot. And when I do that, and sometimes I do that, like it happens before I even realize I'm doing it. being able to stop, there were like the best relationship advice I ever heard was from somebody who said, if I'm arguing with my spouse, whoever wins is the biggest asshole. And that
I
helped,
love that.
Yeah. I mean, never occurred to me before, but when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, the one who hits below the belt, the one who demands that you acknowledge that their point of view is right, instead of understanding that you could have two different points of view. I mean, all of this, like, I mean, I don't know how many people listen to your podcast who are sort of newer to this process, but it all builds on itself and provides an ability to intuitively be able to do a lot of this imperfectly every day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, it reminds me of, I used to do some analytics work or at least have some analytic work done for me when I was in the business realm, and we always referred to it as the best wrong answer, because it's never going to be exactly right. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be necessarily what we envision. But the cool thing about it is, as we're sober and as we stay in a recovery sort of mindset and move ourselves forward, it's very okay. It's very okay. And I embrace the fact that I don't have to be perfect. I can, and that takes a lot of pressure off. There's a lot of freedom in not having to be perfect for myself, but also anybody who expects perfection around me isn't going to be around me very long, because I won't allow that in my life. It's just not, I can't beat myself up like that, and I can't allow others to impose that on me.
Right.
So I mean, we could talk all day about sobriety and all the wonderful, beautiful things. I think we're coming up closer to the end in terms of our time, but I wanted to, and you've been sober for a long time, and just a myriad of experiences and a myriad of things that you've accomplished and done, which I think is the coolest thing. I really do. I respect the heck out of that. And writing the 4 books, and this one, I mean, seriously, if you get a chance to check it out, folks, Michele W. Miller, The Lower Power. It's a novel.
It's scary. It
is scary, and you'll be shocked. And I was shocked, and I was like, holy crap. But then it gripped me, and I was gripped by the story. I was gripped by, sort of being pulled back into the evil. And I never, it's so metaphorical, right? It's so metaphorical, because that could be what happens to all of us. So without giving too much away, a cool book. But before we go, I'd love to have you, for anybody who is new, we're getting more and more listeners all the time, which is cool. And I'm hoping we get some folks that are newly sober, or, it doesn't even necessarily have to be addiction. It can be any of life's problems, any of the issues, paralysis, by fear and all the things, we're scared to do stuff, or we're scared to move forward. Or we need to get better at our recovery or start to move our lives forward. What would you tell folks that are starting on that journey?
I think it's really important to surround ourselves with people who are on a similar journey. I don't think there's any spiritual practice that doesn't talk about having a group. I've always felt that sanity is contagious, and so is insanity. And so when we say stay away from people, places, and things, especially if it's about drugs and alcohol, like get out of the kitchen or you're going to get burnt. You can't, and I had a really hard time with that. I also had a really hard time with the idea of complete abstinence from the various substances. But staying around people who are doing like what you talked about, not being around people who are toxic for you. Like, it is really important to be around people who are on this kind of a path that are trying to be happy, joyous, free, purposeful, and who, look, if you want to be in a happy marriage, don't hang around with the guys that are cheating on their spouse every week, or you're not going to learn how to do that. And if you want to be an honest person, don't hang around with the thieves. It's just as simple as that. You really got to be around people who are, trying to live the kind of life that you would like to live. And I know there's a thing about emulating people who have the spiritual qualities that you would like for yourself. And I think that helped me a lot. And during the pandemic, doing all the Zoom meetings and the like, I got to meet a lot of people, and there were certain people who had the kind of spirit I wanted. And I started, kind of working on that even more, and today I kind of measure things against my spiritual center. Like, am I feeling, does this thing comport that I'm thinking or doing comport with the spiritual center that I have, the spiritual being that I want to be? And if it doesn't, like they say, the two biggest enemies of a recovering person are the two words "F it," right? Like I try, look, I try not to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I quit smoking cigarettes 33 years ago, and I've never said F it when it came to even one drag on a cigarette. And that's the difference between me and the person who goes back and forth on cigarettes. It's just, I never say F it. And I don't know if I've never said F it when it came to a bag of popcorn, but I try not to do that there either. Right. And because, we're trying to live our best life, and we're trying to, take care of ourselves and be the people we want to be in the world. And so it's really important to do the best we can and not ever like just say, yeah, F it.
100% agree, Michele. I think those are beautiful points. And we know there's an internal mechanism that we have been gifted, like the other gifts we talk about, where we know what the right thing to do is and what is not the right thing to do, especially as we're around longer and it's, it becomes very progressive in terms of getting better, not just getting more sick. And I think that's incredibly powerful to understand that, there's always, as long as we're growing and learning and changing, there are better days ahead. And that is all there is to it. It's, you're an example of that. I feel like I'm an example of that. We've been around for a while, and we're both here to tell the story that it can get really cool. A side note, this is something that just cracks me up. Tonight is my wife and I's popcorn night. One night a week, I'll get to have popcorn. So you said that, and you hit me right between the eyes. I love that. That was great.
Well, popcorn is good. A person like me, as I'm not sure I know how to stop eating popcorn. So that's the problem.
I don't either. That's why we do it one night a week, and we've got our batch of popcorn, and that's that. So how do we find you, Michele? How do we find your work? What's the best way to? And I'll put all this information in the show notes, but if you could let us know.
Well, the best thing to do is just go to michelewmiller.com, and you could see all of my books up there, michelewmiller.com. And the books are widely available from all different places, including libraries. If you go to the library, please request that your library order my book. I love libraries. I don't care if you spend any money on my book. Just I want people to read it, and please contact me on my website if you want to. And I would always love to hear from people. And I think that's the easiest way. We'll give you all the links on my website.
That sounds great. I will put that in the show notes, as I said, and people will be able to get in touch. And if you read the book, and I highly recommend reading the book, because it's a really cool. The Lower Power is the one that I've read. I will read the rest. I've just got a backlog that I can't dive into
I hear
right
you.
now.
Me too.
But if you read it, please leave Michele a review. That's really crucial
Right.
for helping move things along, and it helps with our author journey. So if you love it and you can leave a great review, we'd very much appreciate it. Michele, thank you so much. I very much appreciate your time and your wisdom and all that you've shared with us. And
And
we'll
my
talk.
dog is saying goodbye. Can you hear her now?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Hi, pup. All right. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Daryl. Appreciate
All
you.
right.